Emily Dawson, a woman with Down syndrome, walked into the bank full of pride, ready to open her first savings account, the result of months of hard work. But instead of support, she faced public humiliation at the hands of insensitive employees. Just when everything seemed lost, an unexpected voice echoed through the hall, and to everyone's surprise, it was a famous Hollywood actor. What happened next left everyone speechless. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story waiting for you. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Emily Dawson's small apartment, lighting up the simple but cozy space, filled with personal touches. Family photos adorned the walls, and colorful sticky notes with reminders were carefully scattered around. That morning, Emily was especially excited. After months of saving part of her salary as a server at a local cafe, she had finally gathered enough money to open her first savings account. It was an important milestone for her, proof that she could take care of herself, even when the world insisted on underestimating her. She grabbed her notebook, where she had written down every step to open the account, checking each detail one last time. The pages were filled with scribbles and reminders, illustrating her dedication to learning and doing everything correctly. "Today is the day, Emily. You can do this," she told herself in the mirror, repeating the phrase like a mantra of courage. When she arrived at the bank, the scene was chaotic. Lines stretched to the door. People were complaining about the wait, and the staff seemed stressed, trying to keep up with the day's demands. Emily took a deep breath and walked in, clutching her folder of documents tightly. She felt the curious gazes of some customers and employees, but kept her focus on her goal. She joined the line and, as she waited, quietly rehearsed what she would say to the teller. She mentally reviewed her notes, making sure she wouldn't forget any details. When her turn came, she was greeted by Brittany Stanton, a staff member with a tired and impatient expression. Brittany barely looked up at Emily before asking in a disinterested tone, "What do you need?" "I'd like to open a savings account, please," Emily said with a shy but hopeful smile. Brittany took Emily's documents and began reviewing them quickly, but her expression shifted to one of boredom and impatience. "You filled this out wrong here and here. We can't accept it like this." Brittany pushed the papers back toward Emily. "You need to come back with someone who knows how to do this." Emily blinked, confused. She was certain she had followed all the instructions correctly. She tried to explain, "But I checked everything. It's correct. I followed the guide exactly." "Look, sweetheart," Brittany interrupted, using a condescending tone. "There's no point in insisting. This is wrong. Come back with a guardian or someone who can help you." Emily felt her hands tremble slightly. Brittany's cold, insensitive tone began to chip away at her confidence. Even so, she tried again. "I'm my own guardian. I can prove." Before she could finish, Brittany rolled her eyes and exasperatedly announced, loud enough for everyone in the bank to hear, "You're wasting my time. Let someone else handle this, okay?" Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to Emily, who, embarrassed and humiliated, lowered her head. Her face flushed, tears threatening to escape. The weight of that moment felt overwhelming. Still holding her documents, Emily noticed the people around her whispering and looking at her with either pity or disdain. The humiliation was unbearable, but amidst the tension, something unexpected was about to happen. Emily remained standing, trying to summon the strength to withstand the humiliation she was feeling. The murmurs of those around her were like a weight pressing down on her chest. Clutching her documents tightly, she tried to remind herself why she was there, her independence, her accomplishment. But at that moment, it all felt distant. "Please wait over there," Brittany said, pointing to a nearby chair. Her tone was still cold and impatient. Emily walked to the seat, feeling the weight of the stairs around her. Sitting down, she began to organize her papers again, going through everything to figure out what she might have done wrong. "I did everything right. I did everything right," she repeated to herself. A few minutes later, a bank manager, Greg Morgan, appeared. He walked toward Emily with a smile that, at first, seemed friendly, but soon revealed a patronizing undertone. "Hello, Miss Dawson. I'm Greg, the manager. I was informed about your situation. Why don't we have a quick chat?" he said, inviting her to follow him to a table in a quieter corner. Emily took a deep breath and followed him. Sitting across from Greg, she began explaining again why she was there, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. He listened with apparent patience, but as she spoke, his smile shifted to something more condescending. I see, he interrupted mid-sentence. "But I have to ask, are you sure you're ready to manage a bank account on your own? Something like this can be complicated." The question hit Emily like a blow. She swallowed hard but replied firmly, "Yes, I know how to take care of my money. I worked hard to get here." Greg leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together on the table. "Look, I'm not saying you're incapable, but our protocols require certain formalities. For example, your documents don't have a signature from a legal guardian. That could be an issue." Emily furrowed her brow, confused. "I am my own guardian. I can sign." Greg let out a short, uncomfortable laugh, as if trying to soften the situation. "Well, technically yes, but we need to make sure everything is appropriate. Why don't you come back another day with someone who can verify this for you?" Emily felt indignation rising within her. She knew she was being treated unfairly, but before she could respond, she heard murmurs from nearby customers. Some were silently defending her, while others made discriminatory comments. "She probably doesn't even know what she's doing here," muttered a man in line. "Why do they let people like that try to handle complicated things?" Another replied. Emily tried to block out the comments, but their words echoed in her mind, cutting deep. Still, she persisted. "My documents are correct. I read everything before I came. I want to open my account today." Greg sighed, visibly exasperated. "Wait here, I'll check on something." He stood and walked over to Brittany at the counter. From her seat, Emily could hear bits of their conversation. Greg was speaking in a low voice, but his attitude was clear. He shook his head, saying things like, "We can't waste time on this. It's obvious she can't handle something like this on her own." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She didn't want to show weakness, even as everything around her seemed to crumble. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a click. Turning, she saw a nearby customer taking a photo of her with their phone. "This is just so sad," the person commented to someone else. Emily lowered her head, ashamed. She didn't realize her situation was becoming a spectacle for others. She felt alone, exposed, and trapped. As Emily tried to compose herself, the image of her sitting there, visibly shaken, began circulating on social media. The impact of that moment was about to take on a dimension no one in the bank could have predicted. Amidst the chaos of the bank, seated quietly in a discreet corner, was a man trying to remain unnoticed. That man was Keanu Reeves, disguised as he often did during his rare public outings. Keanu had come to the bank for personal matters, but now his attention was fully focused on Emily. He had been watching the situation unfold from the beginning. Brittany's cold tone, Greg's condescending behavior, and the humiliation. Emily endured every word and gesture. Everything had been carefully observed, and Keanu now seemed to be weighing his options, deciding when and how to act. Meanwhile, Emily remained seated, reorganizing her papers for the 100th time. She was trying to hold on to her dignity, even though her red, tear-filled eyes betrayed the toll the moment had taken on her. Keanu watched her with a serious, almost somber expression, clearly unsettled by what he had witnessed. "People like her are always underestimated, aren't they?" an elderly man nearby commented, noticing Keanu's focus on Emily. "It's painful to watch this happen." Keanu gave a small nod but said nothing. His gaze remained fixed on Emily and the bank staff. He knew that when he intervened, it would have to be at just the right moment. Across the room, Greg and Brittany were still talking. Keanu could hear snippets of their conversation. Unproductive, time-consuming, not worth the effort. Each word added to the frustration building inside him. He adjusted his cap and took a deep breath, visibly trying to stay composed. Emily, on the other hand, mustered her courage and approached Greg again, clutching her papers tightly. She tried once more to make her case. "I've done everything I was asked to. Please, I just want to open my account." Without even looking up from the documents on his desk, Greg replied coldly, "I've already explained. Without a legal guardian, we can't do anything. You'll need to come back another day." "But I am my own guardian," Emily insisted, her voice trembling. Greg raised his hand to cut her off. "Miss Dawson, I've told you already. Come back another day with a legal guardian. Do I need to spell it out for you?" Emily stood frozen for a moment before turning to walk toward the bank's exit. Each step felt heavier than the last. The murmurs of those around her continued, some casting pitying looks, others showing disdain. Keanu stood up suddenly, his voice cutting through the murmurs with calm authority. "This has gone far enough," he began, walking toward the counter. His steps were deliberate, yet filled with unmistakable determination. As he approached the desk, where Brittany was about to dismiss Emily once again, he stopped her movement with a quiet but commanding voice. "Can you explain why you're treating this customer like this?" Brittany turned, startled by the interruption. Her irritated expression quickly gave way to confusion. She didn't recognize Keanu immediately because of his disguise. "Sir, this is none of your concern," Brittany replied, attempting to maintain her professional demeanor. Keanu removed his sunglasses, revealing his identity. The reaction was immediate. Brittany's eyes widened, and a few customers nearby began whispering as they recognized the Hollywood star. However, Keanu's calm, firm posture didn't waver. He ignored the growing whispers, keeping his focus on Brittany. "When something like this happens in public, it becomes everyone's concern," he said in a steady voice. "So I'll ask you again, why are you treating this customer this way?" Emily, who had remained silent until now, turned to Keanu, her eyes wide with surprise. She couldn't believe he was standing there, standing up for her. For a moment, she felt as though she finally had someone truly on her side. Brittany, attempting to recover her composure, responded defensively. "Sir, we're just following the bank's protocols." Keanu crossed his arms and locked his gaze on hers. "Protocols?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "Or prejudice disguised as bureaucracy?" The bank fell into absolute silence. All eyes were on the unfolding scene. Brittany opened her mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Greg, noticing the commotion, hurried over to the counter. He tried to defuse the situation, but the nervousness in his demeanor was evident. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, feigning ignorance. Keanu turned his sharp gaze to Greg. "Yes, there is," he said firmly, pointing toward Emily. "This customer came here to open a savings account. She brought all the necessary documents, and yet you're treating her as though she doesn't belong here." Greg, trying to maintain control of the situation, replied, "Sir, please understand. We're just trying to ensure everything is done correctly." Keanu cut him off. "No, what I understand is that you're creating unnecessary obstacles." With every eye in the bank now on him, Keanu picked up Emily's documents and began carefully reviewing them. After a moment, he turned back to Greg and Brittany and said in a firm voice, "These documents are correct. So let me ask you one more time. Why aren't you helping this customer?" The bank was utterly silent. All eyes were on Keanu Reeves, standing firm in front of Greg and Brittany. Emily, still stunned by the unexpected intervention, looked at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She never imagined someone so famous would be there, standing up for her against such injustice. Greg cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Sir, I understand your concern, but we have clear protocols to ensure the security and efficiency of our services," he said with a forced calmness. "This isn't about discrimination. We're simply following the rules." Keanu held Emily's documents in his hand. He skimmed through them quickly, lifting one of the pages and pointing to the form. "Protocols?" he asked sharply. "Then tell me, what exactly is wrong with these documents? Because from what I see, they're filled out correctly. Everything that's required is here." Brittany, now visibly nervous, tried to respond. "Well, sometimes the documents might be filled out, but we need to make sure that the person understands what they're signing. Keanu turned to her slowly, his expression a mixture of disbelief and indignation. Are you suggesting that this customer, who went to all the trouble of following every step and bringing everything that was requested, doesn't understand what she's doing? That's not what I meant, Brittany stammered, but her words faltered. We just want to ensure there are no mistakes. Mistakes? Keanu let out a short, humorless laugh. The only mistake here is how you've treated this woman. You've humiliated her publicly, disregarded her dignity, and now you're trying to justify the unjustifiable. That's unacceptable. The tension in the air was palpable. Other customers in the bank began murmuring, some clearly supporting Keanu, while others stayed silent, absorbing the scene. Greg, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to redirect the focus. Mr. Reeves, we're not trying to create a problem. I understand your concern, but this isn't a simple matter. If we could resolve this more discreetly. No, Keanu interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. This won't be resolved discreetly. Not when you expose this customer for everyone here to see. The discrimination she faced was public, so the resolution will be public too. Emily looked at Keanu, feeling courage begin to well up inside her. For the first time, she stood up from her chair and, with a voice still trembling but filled with determination, said, I just want to be treated the same as anyone else. I deserve respect. I worked hard to save this money. I followed all the rules. What more do you want from me? The room fell silent again. Emily's voice echoed with a strength no one had expected. Keanu turned to her, gave a slight nod of encouragement, and smiled as if to say, You've got this. Greg made one more attempt to regain control. Miss Dawson, please understand, we're not trying to be unfair. It's just that, well, there are situations where additional oversight is necessary. Additional oversight? Keanu shot back. Or just prejudice disguised as bureaucracy. Because so far, all I'm seeing is an institution that prefers to push away customers rather than serve them. Brittany glanced at Greg, waiting for instructions. Greg sighed, clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension. Fine, maybe we can review the documents again and not. Maybe. Keanu interrupted firmly. You will review the documents now, and you will treat this customer with the respect she deserves. Greg took a deep breath, struggling to maintain his composure, but it was evident that he felt cornered. He gestured to Brittany, who reluctantly took the papers again and began reviewing them. Meanwhile, a young woman in line stepped forward and spoke loudly. I've never seen anything like this. She brought everything she needed, and you're still making it harder. Is this really how you treat people here? Another person in line agreed. They do this all the time, always complicating things for the people who need help the most. The situation was quickly turning against the bank. The murmurs grew louder, and Greg knew he needed to make a decision before things escalated further. After a few minutes of reviewing the documents, Brittany finally admitted, her voice barely audible, There's nothing wrong with the documents. They're correct. Greg, now completely out of options, looked at Brittany with a stern expression but knew he couldn't pretend anymore. Turning back to Emily, he forced a smile and said, It seems everything is in order, Miss Dawson. We'll open your account now. Before Greg could close the matter, Keanu raised his hand, stopping him mid-sentence. This doesn't end here. I want to know why you made it difficult from the start. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern, and patterns like this need to change right now. The tension in the bank was palpable. Greg and Brittany stood visibly uncomfortable as Keanu held his ground, his piercing gaze fixed on them. Emily, standing beside him, still clutched her papers, her expression a mix of relief and newfound determination. The murmurs of the customers around them created a rising pressure that neither Greg nor Brittany could ignore. Keanu stepped forward, holding Emily's documents as if presenting irrefutable evidence in a courtroom. So, if the documents are correct, he began, his voice resonating through the room, why did you spend so much time trying to stop this customer from opening an account? I want a clear explanation, and I won't accept protocols as an answer." Greg cleared his throat, struggling to maintain a professional tone, but the unease in his demeanor was undeniable. "Mr. Reeves, there's no discrimination here. These are simply guidelines we follow to ensure the bank operates efficiently," he said. Keanu arched an eyebrow, his voice tinged with sharp sarcasm. "Guidelines?" He turned to Brittany. "Then explain to me how these guidelines justify the condescending tone, interruptions, and public humiliation this customer endured. Because, frankly, this looks more like institutional prejudice than efficiency." Brittany opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. Finally, under the weight of Keanu's gaze, Emily's quiet strength, and the murmuring crowd, she blurted out, "It's not my fault. This is just how we're told to handle situations like this. Customers with special needs or comprehension issues usually take more time." "Take more time?" Keanu repeated, his voice rising slightly. "And because of that, you'd rather push them away than provide them with the same service as anyone else." Brittany averted her gaze, and Greg stepped in to try and regain control. "This isn't an official policy, Mr. Reeves. It's just practices that develop over time. To make your jobs easier, to save a few minutes at the expense of respect and dignity." Keanu cut him off, his indignation clear. "This practice may not be written down, but it's as real as if it were carved into the walls of this bank." Emily, emboldened by Keanu's presence, raised her voice toward Greg for the first time. "So I'm not the only person you've treated this way, am I?" The silence that followed was heavy. More murmurs rippled through the crowd. A man in the line raised his hand and said, "They do this with seniors too. My mom had to come back 3 times because she didn't understand the forms." A woman next to him nodded. "My cousin, who's autistic, went through the same thing. They pretend it's a mistake, but you can tell they just don't want to deal with you." Keanu turned back to Greg, his eyes blazing. "Are you hearing this? This isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern, a systemic problem, and you're responsible for perpetuating it." Greg, now visibly cornered, sighed and ran a hand over his forehead. "I acknowledge that there may be some practices within our team that discourage customers who require more time. It's not official, but it happens. We're dealing with quotas and deadlines, and sometimes it leads to bad choices." Emily looked at him in disbelief. "So that's it? You treat people like me as a burden because you want to save time?" Greg opened his mouth to respond, but Keanu stepped in before he could. "This isn't just a problem with this bank. This is a reflection of a society that values efficiency over humanity. But today, here that stops." Greg exhaled deeply and finally admitted, "Fine. Yes, there are unspoken practices that develop, and sometimes they lead to discouraging customers who take more time. It's not right, and it needs to change." Emily's voice, firm and steady, cut through the murmurs. "All I wanted was to open my account. It shouldn't have been this hard. I deserve to be treated like anyone else here." The murmurs of agreement grew louder, and Greg visibly struggled to respond. Brittany, looking completely shaken, murmured, "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was just following orders." Keanu pointed toward her, his tone firm but calm. "Orders you knew were wrong. We all have a choice. Today, you made the wrong one." Keanu stepped forward, locking eyes with Greg and Brittany. "This isn't over. I'll make sure this story reaches the people who can enforce real change. Because patterns like this, they don't just fade away. They need to be broken, starting now." The silence in the bank was broken by timid applause from a few customers, which soon grew louder. Keanu's words had struck a chord, not only with Greg and Brittany, but with everyone present. Emily, who had felt so alone and vulnerable just moments ago, now felt the weight of a collective force standing with her. Greg, trying to maintain his composure, raised his hands as if to calm the room. All right. Let's resolve this now," he said, turning to Brittany. "Please finalize Miss Dawson's account immediately." Brittany, still flustered, took Emily's documents and began entering them into the system. Meanwhile, Emily looked up at Keanu, her timid smile and glistening eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me," she said softly but sincerely. Keanu smiled back and replied, "It wasn't just for you. It was for everyone who has been or will be in your position. You deserve to be treated with respect, Emily. Never doubt that." As Brittany worked, Greg attempted to regain control of the narrative on behalf of the bank. "I'd like to apologize for everything that happened today. This does not reflect our institution's values. I promise we'll take steps to review our practices." Keanu stared at Greg for a moment, as if assessing the authenticity of his words before responding. "Words are a good start, but actions are what really matter. This isn't just about changing procedures. It's about changing mindsets. The people you underestimate are just as capable as anyone else, and in the end, they're the ones who make the biggest difference." Emily listened to those words and felt a wave of confidence wash over her. For the first time that day, she felt truly seen and respected. Brittany finally completed the process and handed Emily a receipt. "Your account is open," Brittany said in a more subdued and even slightly remorseful tone. "I'm sorry for the confusion." Emily took the receipt carefully, holding it like a trophy. She smiled, her eyes brimming with tears, but her expression radiated strength. "I did it." Though her words were meant for herself, everyone around her heard them. Greg turned to Keanu, still attempting to smooth over the situation. "I hope we can move past this. We want to learn from our mistakes." Keanu shook his head, his expression serious. "Learning is important, but it doesn't erase what happened today. Remember, every customer who walks through these doors has a story, a struggle, and a reason for being here. Respect should be the bare minimum." He turned to Emily. "Emily, don't forget this. You are strong and brave. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you truly are." Emily smiled, feeling more empowered than ever. "Thank you, I won't forget." At that moment, one of the customers who had taken a photo of Emily earlier stepped forward. "I want to apologize. When I took that picture, I thought I was just capturing something sad. But now I see that you're an inspiration. You showed more courage today than most people ever will." Emily thanked him, unsure of how to respond. Keanu, however, looked at the man and said, "If you really believe that, share what you learned today. It's not enough to just watch. We all have a role to play." Emily held the receipt for her newly opened account, feeling stronger than ever. Keanu turned to address everyone in the room with a brief but powerful statement. "Respect shouldn't be something you fight to earn. It should be the foundation of any relationship. No matter who we are or where we come from, we all deserve to be treated with dignity." As Keanu left the bank, he turned back one last time to smile at Emily and give her a small wave. Emily, now filled with confidence, smiled back, knowing that this day would change her life forever. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.